Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about Mr. David, the Mexican monster, Benavidez. And, of course, for those of you that did not end up seeing the card as of yesterday, the two fights, at least on that main event, or that PBC card, they pretty much ended up going out. I thought they were going to go. I think that I predicted David Benavidez and Gervonta Tank Davis to win by that of unanimous decision. And Gervonta Tank Davis, even for his punching power, which I knew is extraordinary, I was a little bit surprised that he ended up actually getting Frank Martin out of there with just those couple of punches when he ended up starting to finally get within the range. So Gervonta Tank Davis definitely gets a certain amount of credit out of me because Frank Martin, of course, I don't think that he was necessarily an A-plus level guy in my personal view. But like I said, I compare that fight very similarly to a Canelo versus Caleb Plant type of fight, to where Frank Martin had a lot of skills. He was a guy that certainly had a chance to win the fight, but the question was going to be was he going to have the level of power to threaten that of Gervonta Tank Davis, and was he going to have the level of courageousness and assertiveness in order to win that fight? And the answer in all three of those categories, pretty much like I had predicted, was no, no, and no. So it is what it is. But in another conversation, David Benavidez, of course, was also on the undercard, fighting that of former light heavyweight champion of the world, Mr. Alexander Vozick, or Vozick, however you pronounce his name. And certain things were shown about David Benavidez yesterday, which is that even though he's still a very talented boxer, and even though he's a guy that, of course, is going to be a very big threat to anyone that he faces, even at the light heavyweight class, there were certain chinks in the armor that we did see yesterday, which is pretty much what I predicted once David Benavidez was going to go up the weight classes. And like I already stated, and I've told people this now for years, David Benavidez is not an A-plus level puncher. He never has been. David Benavidez is what is known, at least in my personal view, as a weight bully. That's what David Benavidez is. And that doesn't mean, once again, that David Benavidez does not deserve credit for some of the wins that he's gotten. At the end of the day, he has been able to defeat Caleb Plant and Demetrius Bubo Andrade and maybe even a couple other contenders that you want to put on the list if you really want to. But David Benavidez is a guy that at the minimum should be fighting at the light heavyweight class. He's not a guy that is a really natural super 168 pounder. And David Benavidez is going to look more intimidating and look like more of a monster against those guys because he's really naturally bigger than those guys. So it is what it is. But once again, as I already stated, Benavidez has a very good power. It's just not extraordinary power. So when people keep trying to compare David Benavidez as a Gennady Golovkin type of puncher, that's not what he is. Now, could he possibly have the same level of punching power as a Gennady Golovkin because he's bigger than Gennady Golovkin, probably by about, to be quite honest with you, 3 weight classes? Yeah, probably. It's very possible. But in terms of, for pound, for his natural weight classes or his natural size, is he a guy that can knock you out or break bone, overall with just one punch? No, he's not one of those guys. David Benavidez is a guy that has to get you with punches and bunches. He has to have that level of stamina. And what I will say is this: David Benavidez did not look as good in the second half of this fight as what he did in other fights because it looked like he exhausted himself a little bit too much, which does make me wonder, how well is he going to favor against Demetrius Bivol and Benavidez? And I think that it's possible that he may be able to defeat Bivol, possibly. I, of course, do believe that Bivol is the better boxer, but David Benavidez is a guy to where if you don't push him back and also if you don't go to his body a little bit, he can potentially outbox you because David Benavidez just throws so many punches and bunches. Like, he'll throw 500 to 600 punches throughout the whole entire fight, and he loves to put the punishment on people. But the real question is, of course, about Mr. David Benavidez is that how is he going to fare potentially against Benavidez? That's going to be the real question. And for those of you that have heard my opinions in the past, you already know that, I kind of predicted that Benavidez would probably be beat by either Demetrius Bivol or that of Benavidez. After taking a look at this fight, my mind really hasn't wavered too much. It's possible that he may be able to defeat Demetrius Bivol just because Bivol, he doesn't change levels a whole lot. And on top of that, you can get him to retreat at certain times. But Benavidez, at least the Benavidez, is not aged out too much because the man is already about 40 years old. When it comes down to it, that's going to be a really, 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 really tough fight for David Benavidez. And this is why I've also stated that the LDBC and new media, this is also why they've put so much stock within that of David Benavidez, because they realize that David Benavidez is never going to be a true threat to the number 1 pound-for-pound spot. They just need him to take out Canelo Alvarez. That's the main reason why they put so much stock in David Benavidez. They don't truly believe that Benavidez is going to beat Dimitri Bivol or Beterbiev. They certainly don't believe that he's going to become a great champion within the light heavyweight class against those guys, and certainly not in the cruiserweight or heavyweight class, because that's the only way that in their mind, and also in a lot of people's minds, to where Benavidez could truly ever threaten the number one pound for pound spot. For Benavidez to ever potentially be the number one pound for pound fighter, in my view, not only would he have to beat the best guys at light heavyweight, but he would also have to go up to cruiserweight and beat some of the best guys there. And in other certain people's minds, he may even have to start moving up to heavyweight. But I would at least give David Benavidez the credit if he can be undefeated, or at least prove that he's the best within those three weight classes of, that of super middleweight, light heavyweight, and that of cruiserweight. He's already been a champion at the super middleweight class. We'll see what happens with the Canelo Alvarez fight. We'll see where he goes from here. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say. And of course, this is going to be a video by that of Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So when I first found out that David Benavidez was moving up to 175, I was really curious to see how he would deal with the new weight class. Because size does matter in the sport of boxing. When you move up in weight, at least when you keep moving up in weight, if you're a power puncher that usually relies on knocking your opponents out, you rely on your power. You can't really rely on your power anymore when you're fighting against bigger guys. So you have...
What is Dante's Boxing Nation really saying there about David Benavidez? Excuse me. What is he really saying there about Mr. David Benavidez? He's saying that once you start moving up the weight classes and you rely so much on your power and you can't really rely on your power anymore, you may not quite look the same. What is he saying about David Benavidez? He's saying that David Benavidez is a guy overall that pretty much is a weight bully, and he's a guy that relies a lot on his pressurized and his powerized style. But if he does not find an opponent that is going to bow down overall to his strength and his size, he's a little bit more limited. So even Dante's Boxing Nation knows that David Benavidez is not an A+ skilled fighter. David Benavidez is a guy, once again, that is a very talented fighter. And in my view, debatably one of the top 20, top 30 pound for pound fighters in the world. He's very dangerous, certainly. And he's defeated some very good names like, Andrade and Caleb Plant. But also, if we're going to be real, he's probably about a weight class, if not a weight class and a half bigger than those guys. And when we're talking about him versus Canelo, I mean, forget it. He's about, 2 to 2.5 weight classes bigger than Canelo Alvarez.
Have to be able to adjust and sometimes find a new way to win, which is what David Benavidez did against Alexander Vozick. But it wasn't as easy as David thought it was going to be.
Well, no, he didn't really find a new way to beat Alexander Vozick. It's just that he pretty much did overall what he always was going to do, which is pressurize the fighters. And Vozick didn't have the boxing IQ, nor did he have the confidence to really get at David Benavidez. And, don't get it twisted. That doesn't mean that you have to fight David Benavidez toe-to-toe or try to back him up the whole entire time. But I don't understand why so many guys because Benavidez is a lot like that of Vesubrio Matias. He's like a better version of Vesubrio Matias. He's smarter and more technical than that of Vesubrio Matias. But it's like, who of course ended up losing yesterday to that of Liam Paro, which I'll probably talk about here soon. But, David Benavidez is a guy to where he loves to make you wear yourself out, because he's going to put that Mexican shell defense up. He's going to put his hands up, right overall on his face. And he wants you to wear yourself out by trying to hit him to the head. You have to hit David Benavidez to the body to make the hands drop a little bit and also to wear him out a little bit more. All right, that's what you have to do. You can't just hit, his arms and his hands the whole entire time. You have to have a good body attack. And Vozick just didn't have a good body attack whatsoever.
For the first time, we've seen David get tired and hit his opponent with everything in a book. And never did Benavidez stagger, hurt, or wobble Vozick, which could be pretty...
Well, there was a couple of times where I thought Vozick looked a little bit hurt. I'm not going to state overall that he didn't look hurt. But, what I will state is that there was never a time where I thought that Vozick was ever going to get seriously knocked out. But so far, my assertions about David Benavidez, they've all proven to be correct.
Discouraging when you're David Benavidez and you're used to knocking everyone out. It's weird how it works in boxing, because not all the time, but a lot of times the power punchers, when they move up in weight, their power is usually not as effective, especially when they move up multiple weight classes. Perfect example, Nonito Donaire when he moved up and got knocked out. Chocolatito Gonzalez.
Well, honestly, Nonito Donaire's power was always effective. The problem with Nonito is that he was just a much more limited boxer than what a lot of people overall thought that he actually was. There are certain guys where, yes, once they start moving up the weight classes, their power is not quite as effective. Maybe like Vasily Lomachenko, because Lomachenko's about a natural 126 to 130 pounder. When you talk about him, maybe some other fighters. And then, of course, there's some other fighters to where when they move up the weight classes, their power is either just as effective, if not even a little bit more, such as Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford. Now, of course, Canelo Alvarez, he got caught on PEDs, on clenbuterol at one point in time. So I'll leave that, for you to judge. And of course, Terence Bud Crawford, he's with that of the snack program, which is basically just a gigantic PED organization. So once again, I'll let you guys, leave that to the imagination. But David Benavidez, once again, he's never going to be an Artibeta beef. He's never going to be a guy that just one shot knocks out guys. He's never going to be that guy. And I've told people this for the longest time. Benavidez does not have that crunching, that bone crunching power overall to where he's just going to hurt you that badly within one shot. It's not going to happen. He's not a Canelo. He's not a Crawford. He's not a Gervonta Tank Davis. He's not an Inoue. He's not a Better Beef. That's not what he is.
When he moved up and got knocked out, because his power or their power was no longer as effective as it was when they were in the smaller weight classes. And it's not just power punchers. Even when Demetrius Andrade moved up to fight David Benavidez, we seen him get completely annihilated by David. This is why fighters that have
Demetrius Andrade, the most overrated boxer probably within the past 10 plus years. I'm not even quite sure if it's close. And I know a lot of people overall are going to be like, oh, well, we can talk about some other guys. I've never heard a boxer. I mean, and I can state maybe some other fighters that, maybe I could talk about that are quote unquote overrated, like Deontay Wilder, at least by a certain amount of his fans. But at least Deontay Wilder had like 10 title defenses. And Deontay Wilder, I'll at least give him this. Like, at least he beat Luis Ortiz. like I'll give him that. Demetrius Andrade had never even defeated a former champion before. Like that's how poor his resume actually was. And I'm not blaming everything on Andrade. Canelo, in my view, did find a way to kind of not fight that fight. There have been other fighters. Billy Joe Saunders, of course, caught on PEDs, and, he found a way to slither out of that fight. I'm not blaming everything on Demetrius Andrade. But there was also certain opportunities, in my view, that he could have took, in my view, in order to grow his career. Like he could have signed with the PBC and Showtime way earlier. But he stated overall that why would I do that when I can fight these guys and I'm getting paid way more? So Andrade, unfortunately for himself, even though a partial part of it is not all his fault, there's also a part of him that really has no one else to blame but himself.
Moved up multiple weight classes and they remained dominant.
And once again, people always try to state all this stuff. I remember when the Benavidez fight was happening, people said, oh, Andrade is 10 times better than Caleb Plant. And then what happened? Demetrius Andrade couldn't even last any more than 6 full rounds. So, miss me with all this. Andrade is 10 times better than Caleb Plant bullshit, which I pretty much saw right through from the beginning.
Are so special. Fighters like Terence Crawford, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, these are fighters who often had to fight guys much bigger than them, especially Floyd Mayweather. Almost everyone Floyd fought was 10 to 20 pounds bigger than.
Well, Terence Crawford hasn't really fought an opponent that's been way bigger than him. And that's the thing that I'm going to state about Crawford. And I like Crawford. Crawford is a phenomenal fighter. Crawford has moved up the weight classes, but he hasn't really ever had to fight a fighter that's been a decent amount bigger than him. The only fighter that I can really claim that with, at least that was elite, was maybe Errol Spence. That's about it. But, he might have been a little bit thicker or girthier than Terence Bud Crawford. But it kind of evened out with the fact that Crawford had about, probably, a 2 to 3 inch reach advantage when it came down to it. So it's like, I don't know. To me, that's, to me, it's not like when Floyd fought Canelo Alvarez or Victor Ortiz, so it's whatever. And, I, of course, would place Errol Spence probably higher than Victor Ortiz, of course, on an all-time great list in terms of all-around skill and all-around ability. Because I don't think that Ortiz would have ever been one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, or had the resume of an Errol Spence Jr. or the boxing ability or boxing IQ. That's fine, but I don't know where this narrative is coming from to where Terence Crawford just fights guys that are a decent amount bigger than him. It's never happened.
him, which is why, once again,
Crawford rehydrates at 160 pounds. He is a welterweight fighter.
You can't just rely on one attribute like power. You have to have the complete package. Now, with what I've seen with David Benavidez against Stick, I think he's going to have a hard time at the new weight class. I think he's...
As do I. At least when he fights Dimitri Bivol or fights that of an Benavidez. He better stay away from Benavidez. Because let me tell you what, Benavidez, he puts that punishment on your ass. And David Benavidez, he relies a whole lot on overall outthrowing his opponent. And it's possible that he may be able to do it on Benavidez. But let me tell you what, those punches will start landing. Benavidez is going to feel those things. he's going to feel those fists of fury overall from that of Benavidez. Benavidez is nothing to fuck around with.
Going to have a hard time adjusting. I would not be surprised if he moves back down to 168. If he could not knock down Alexander Usyk or even hurt him, the guy that...
Did this motherfucker just say Alexander Usyk? It's Vozick. Dontae's Boxing Nation, man. Dante and Aki TV, out of any of the boxing channels that I've seen, they get the most amount of names wrong out of anybody else that I've seen.
Arthur Beterbiev completely knocked out. I think David is going to have a harder time at 175. When he's fighting at 168, he's usually...
Well, of course he is, because David Benavidez is a natural 175 pounder at a minimum. Of course he is. David Benavidez is fighting guys that are smaller than him. It's no offense against David Benavidez. It's like David Benavidez, once again, of course, there's that great fight with Canelo Alvarez, but to be quite honest with you, David Benavidez should be able to win that fight against Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez is starting to age a little bit as a fighter, and on top of that, Canelo was 5'7" with a 71-inch arm reach. He rehydrates a little bit bigger, for his size, kind of like Gervonta Tank Davis. But that fight would kind of be like if Gervonta Tank Davis fought, like I'm trying to think like Marcos Maidana or some shit at the 147-pound weight class. Like that's pretty much what that fight would be like.
Bigger than his opponents, and he can rely once again on his power and his aggression.
Except Canelo Alvarez would even have more of a height disadvantage because Benavidez is going to be like 6'2", and Canelo is once again 5'7". So when people state over all this stuff, and don't get it twisted, I like this fight, but when people state overall that, Canelo needs to fight Benavidez, listen, what people don't understand what they're asking. They're asking Canelo Alvarez to pretty much fight a cruiserweight, and not only a cruiserweight, but a cruiserweight that's about A-grade level ability.
Which, by the way, if he had the complexion of a Terrence Crawford, a Errol Spence, or a Devin Haney, fans would be calling him a weight bully. We know what time it is. So once again...
Well, Dante, here's the thing. You've had the opportunity to call David Benavidez a weight bully in the past. And if David Benavidez was one of these fighters to where, once again, you needed to tear him down, you would have called him a weight bully very long ago. Let's be real. But the reason why you're not calling David Benavidez a weight bully is because you still have a use for him, and that is to tear down Canelo Alvarez. Because once again, they know what's up. They know what time it is. They realize that David Benavidez is never going to be a legitimate threat towards ever being one of the top 20 to top 10 greatest fighters of all time. They know that Canelo Alvarez right now has that ability. So they have to tear him down the best way possible. Okay? That's the reason why. So Dante can tell you all this bullshit about, overall, like, we don't think Canelo's even on the level of Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. All that's bullshit. They realize that Canelo, once again, is on a very high level.
And David Benavidez, relying on his power and his aggression, it's not as effective at the new weight class. We not only seen David Benavidez get tired, but David, he also started to back up in this fight. Something you don't see David do too often. Before I used to think...
Yes, and David Benavidez is not a great fighter on the back foot. He has to be on the front foot. That's not me stating that he can't fight on the back foot whatsoever, but he is not a great fighter on the back foot. If he gets in the ring with an Beterbiev, in my view, and Beterbiev forces him to fight on the back foot the majority of the time and runs him into shots, it's not going to end up well for David Benavidez. But you never know. Benavidez is, once again, he is quite talented. Excuse me.
I think that David Benavidez against the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev was a 50-50 fight. But now I'm starting to think David fighting at 175 is like Superman fighting without his powers. He no longer has a size advantage and his power is not the same. And he's obviously not as elusive as a Gervonta Tank Davis.
Same shit I've been saying, sir. Welcome to the party.
A Naoya Inoue or a Terrence Crawford, which is an attribute you need when you're fighting at higher weight classes. So
fighting in any weight class, but agreed, especially when you're fighting at a higher weight class to where you're their more natural size. Once again, David Benavidez is a weight bully. That's what he is. Okay? Don't get it twisted. He's still a very good fighter. And his wins over Caleb Plant and his wins over Demetrius Andrade, they deserve credit, even A-grade level credit. Don't get it twisted. But once again, like I keep telling people this, David Benavidez is not an A-plus skilled level boxer. That's not what he is. All right? He is within that class of Antonio Margarito. He is within that class overall of those guys. Now, he's a better version, in my view, of Antonio Margarito. But he's still within that class. He has to come forward on you. He has to, he has to make sure that you feel threatened by his presence. And if that's not there, then, there's no telling what can happen.
The post-fight press conference, he talked about the difference fighting at 175 and how the guys can take a good punch at 175. He talked about how they could take a better punch, but he also talked about the fighters punching harder at 175, which he obviously was talking about.
Well, Mr. David Benavidez, if you think that Alexander Vozick punches hard, wait until you get in the ring with that of Benavidez.
Stick. Now, guys, I want to make it clear. I'm not suggesting that David Benavidez, he has no chance to be successful at 175. I'm just saying it will clearly be more difficult for him to be dominant at 175 than he has been at 168.
David, over here, Power 106, healing. This is your first fight at this weight class. What can you take from this survival lesson for your future fights, and if you stay in this weight class?
The only thing I can take from this fight that these dudes, they take a shot pretty well. They take a shot with my son wants to leave, but they take a shot pretty well, and I just want to go back into the gym and get better. You know what I mean? Just work on different stuff, and the boxing is not easy at all. You know what I mean? Sometimes you move up in weight. These dudes take a better shot, but that's what it is. Boxing at the end of the day, it's not supposed to be easy. And it was a great fight tonight.
Let me tell you guys about East.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. We'll see where Mr. David Benavidez goes from here. I pretty much root for everyone to be as successful as possible. So it'd be very interesting, or it'd be nice to see if David Benavidez actually could pull off the upsets over Dimitri Bivol or Benavidez. We'll see what ends up happening. Do I believe that he'll beat either of those fighters? I think that he'll have a better chance against Dimitri Bivol, but would I favor him against Benavidez? Absolutely not. I just think that Benavidez, he has way too much power. He has way too much ability. Benavidez might even be slightly bigger than that of an Benavidez, because to be honest with you, Benavidez even still looks slightly bigger than that of a Vozick, at least when you talk about the thickness of his back. But, when it comes down to it, Benavidez, that dude just has so much power in his hands. That guy, and on top of that, he has good technical ability. There's some things that you can take advantage of, yes. But Benavidez is a guy to where once he starts throwing on you, his opponents basically just start in retreat mode. And the question will be about David Benavidez is he going to be able to push constantly against Benavidez when for the first time he feels a level of power that he's never felt before from an opponent? We'll see. I don't know. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. I would love to see David Benavidez versus the winner of Bivol versus Benavidez. Of course, I would also like to see the Canelo Alvarez fight. We'll see if that happens. From what I'm hearing, Canelo versus Crawford is very possible, which is a fight that I find interesting, but I also think that Crawford may be biting off a little bit more than he could chew, but we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.